was not the post-exile God's people had hoped for. Their vaunted dreams of a restored Jerusalem came crashing down around them. This was not the post-exile that they had been hoping for. First of all, when they got back, they realized that the land was not empty, just waiting on their return. There were other people there, other Judeans. Remember the ones who were not worth it to carry off into exile? Turns out they're still there. This was not the post-exile they'd been hoping for. Imagine, too, the perspective of those who had stayed as their fellow Judeans crested the Jerusalem hills. Now there are Israelites here who speak a different language, who have these weird customs, who crave strange foods. There are disagreements. Some want an insular Jewish community, while others wonder about the well-being of their former Persian neighbors. This was not the post-exile they hoped for. And when it comes to rebuilding the temple and restoring its rituals, a post-exile question arises that they never thought to be prepared for. What does it mean to be faithful to Yahweh now? It calls to mind a question from our own time, one that we never thought to be prepared to ask. What does it mean to be faithful to God in a post-pandemic world? I mean, is this the post-pandemic we expected? There was a time in the midst of lockdown where I certainly dreamed that things could be different. I could be less busy and more purposeful in my time. I could be less distracted by social media and technology and more present with those I love. I could also probably lose 20 pounds. Our society could be less contentious and conflicted and more neighborly, more kind. Now, admittedly, those thoughts were probably lockdown day 2. And by week 2, I was just surviving, you know? But I don't think that these questions have left us. Just because the height of the pandemic is in our rearview mirror, what does it mean to be faithful to God in a post-pandemic world? Post-exile, Isaiah paints for the people an inclusive vision where faithfulness to God is lived out not in a desperate attempt to preserve a long ago past, but where faithfulness to God is lived out in an inclusive community marked by radical neighbor love. Look, says Isaiah, we've been saying that the end of exile is good news, but if it isn't good news for the oppressed and the brokenhearted and the captive and the prisoner and the mourning, then it isn't good news at all. The people on the top are endlessly encouraged every day. Announcements to their benefits come regularly, and if not, they're privileged enough to procure their own good news. But good news for those who are struggling, that's the rising tide that raises all ships. See, Isaiah's good news comes not just to those who were taken away, captives and prisoners, but also to those who stayed, the ones who mourn in Zion. It would be easy to assume that they all made it through exile because of their faithfulness to Yahweh, but Isaiah wants to show them that they made it through exile because Yahweh was faithful to them. And because their response to Yahweh's faithfulness was faithfulness to each other. Whether they stayed or whether they were carried off, wherever they were faithful to each other. They were together in community. And now, together, they will rebuild. Together, they will grieve the former things, and together, they will see what will spring up from shoots and seeds sown long ago. Together, they will be called oaks of righteousness, massive, slow-growing trees whose lifespans dwarf humanity's. I have to tell you that I struggled writing this week, beloved, because I realized that whatever hopes I had for a post-pandemic life were all pretty self-centered. All the things that I could do differently, all the ways that I could be different. And when I assessed myself, I always came up lacking. I've hunted around for easy game plans so that my life can be better, and it's impossible to find because I cannot do it alone. I cannot make myself more hopeful on my own. Elie Wiesel once said, "I've learned 2 lessons in my life. First, there are no sufficient literary, psychological, or historical answers to human tragedy, only moral ones. Second, just as despair can come to one another only from other human beings, hope, too, can be given to one only by other human beings." I want a game plan for hope, but so long as hope involves me and me alone, there's no plan. Isaiah tells us that hope doesn't involve an exercise regimen, a better diet, or a perfect to-do list. Hope's game plan involves other people, binding them up, proclaiming to them liberty, release, and jubilee, comforting them, providing for them, giving to them. It is as Thoreau once said, "There's no remedy for love but to love more." Or as you saw when you came in, hope's game plan is to love boldly. I was once asked to speak to a philosophy undergraduate class about the good life from a religious perspective. What did that mean to me, the good life? And the best that I could come up with was no salvation for me without salvation for we. Bad grammar, good rhyming, right? No salvation for me without salvation for we. Because the bottom line is that hope doesn't belong to any one person. That's not hope, that's just wishful thinking. Hope is meant to be shared. Amen.